Ileana stumbled over the uneven cobblestones as she neared the dorms, the wind tugging at her suitcase and jacket. Fresh from a distant town, eager and nervous about starting university life, she straightened up and took a deep breath. Her parents had insisted she stay in the dormitories to make friends and experience campus life fully. They couldn't have known how wrong that decision would turn out to be. The fading sunlight glinted off the brick walls of the dorm wing, and a single window at the end of the hallway caught her eye, oddly dark and still. She had been assigned room 407, a standard double-occupancy room in the renovated dormitory. Before she could open the door, a senior student intercepted her. The woman was tall and wearing a sharp blazer with her hair pulled neatly into a braid. She explained that due to a mix-up, Ileana's actual room was elsewhere. Without delay, she guided Ileana down a slightly secluded corridor at the edge of the dorm. The door at the end bore the number 412, and it was here that Ileana would stay. Ileana moved in quickly, unpacking her belongings while the afternoon light filtered through the windows. Later that day, her roommate arrived. Lena stepped in with a casual air, slightly shorter than Ileana, with sharp eyes that darted around the room as if assessing it before settling her bag beside the bed. Lena's smile was polite but distant, and she laughed easily at small jokes, making Ileana feel comfortable, though a subtle unease lingered. The first signs of abnormality were faint. Other students glanced towards Ileana as she walked to classes, whispering behind their hands and stepping back when she approached. One evening in the dorm room, Ileana asked Lena if she knew the reason behind the whispers and stares. Lena's explanation was surprising and revealed a lot of things that Ileana had no idea about. Years ago, a student had died in the room 412, the same room Ileana and Lena were staying in. The incident had been hushed by the university, hidden in old reports and rumors. The girl had been pushed out of the dorm window, falling to her death. Since then, the room had long been avoided by everyone. Ileana's heart pounded, and she swallowed around a ball of air that felt thick in her throat. She pushed herself to her feet and turned toward Lena. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room before settling back on her roommate. In a hurried breath, she suggested that they changed rooms, but Lena let out a quiet chuckle from where she sat on the edge of the bed. She leaned back on her hands and casually pointed out no one had died here in years, and even then the story had only been rumors. Ileana, still feeling uneasy, moved to the door and brought up her suggestion again, but then Lena's expression shifted. The movement was small, but sudden enough to make Ileana stop mid-sentence. Lena insisted with a surprisingly firm tone that the room was fine. Ileana's hand slipped away from the door handle. Slowly, she nodded, though the jittery feeling in her chest refused to fade. That night, the room was exceptionally quiet. Ileana lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint glow from the hallway light leaking under the door. Lena lay on her side with her dark hair spilling across the pillow. A chill crept slowly along her spine, and she turned her head towards Lena's bed. Ileana watched for a moment before turning her gaze back towards the ceiling. She closed her eyes. The faint, crawling feeling of being watched returned almost immediately. She opened her eyes again and carefully turned around. Lena hadn't moved at all, she was still in the same position. Ileana swallowed and rolled back onto her side, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Behind her, the room remained perfectly still, but the feeling of that silent gaze never left her. Days later, Ileana went to the library to escape the uneasy atmosphere between her and Lena. The place was quiet in the late afternoon, filled with the low murmur of voices and the soft turning of pages. She spotted a male student sitting at a round table near the back, surrounded by stacks of old yearbooks and campus records. Deciding to sit opposite him, she set her books down, which elicited a quick glance and a change in expression from the male student. However, Ileana had already grown used to such behavior. After a while, one of the thick yearbooks slipped from the edge of the student's stack and landed on the floor. The sound echoed lightly through the quiet room. Ileana reached for it first. As she lifted the book, it fell open in her hands. A page of photographs stared back at her, including smiling students standing outside the same dormitory building she now lived in. Beneath the images were lists of names and room numbers. Her gaze lingered on one entry longer than the others, room 412. He glanced briefly toward the dormitory photo again, then back at her, his posture stiffening slightly. The uneasiness between them stretched for a moment before Ileana quietly mentioned that she lived in that room now. The student she would later learn to be Marvin went still with his fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the yearbook. For several seconds he said nothing at all. His eyes flicked toward the library entrance, then toward the nearby tables, as if checking whether anyone might be close enough to overhear. Only after confirming that no one was looking at them did he lean slightly closer across the table. His voice was low as he began to speak. Through that uneasy conversation, Ileana began to learn what Marvin had been researching in those old records. His project focused on the history of the campus dormitories, particularly the incidents that had been quietly buried. This included the incident that happened in room 412. Years ago, a girl had died there. Officially, it had been recorded as a fall from the window. But according to the stories that circulated quietly among students, the girl had not simply fallen. She had died consumed by resentment so deep that it had rooted itself inside the room itself. Over time, the story had grown into a darker legend that anyone who lived in that room would inherit the same torment. That was why the students kept their distance from her. Ileana felt a cold dread sink into her stomach. However, she noticed a discrepancy between the versions told by Marvin and Lena. In Lena's version, the victim had been pushed out the window, but in Marvin's version, she committed suicide. When she mentioned Lena's story, Marvin froze. The color drained from his face as he asked which roommate had told her this. In response, Ileana described Lena in detail. Marvin's hands shook, his gaze darting around nervously as he told her that she had no roommate. She was the only occupant of room 412. The realization hit Ileana like a punch to the chest when she connected the dots of past events. She rushed to the dorm, her fingers trembling as she hastily packed her belongings, intending to request for a new room. The door opened behind her and Lena stepped in. Her expression was calm at first, but when her gaze fell on the open suitcase and the messy clothes, her expression became stony. Ileana froze, trying to explain herself, but Lena called her out on her bluff, knowing that the gig was up. And as a result, the truth was unfolded. The girl who had lost her life years ago in this very room was not Lena, contrary to what Ileana had thought. The first death had started it all. A fight between a pair of roommates had ended with one of them being pushed through the window and her fall being written off as an accident. This caused the anger, the betrayal and terror of it all to be rooted in the room as resentment, refusing to fade. As a result, she could not leave. She was bound to the place where she died, and when time passed, she found a way out. She lured another girl into room 412 and pushed her through the same window. That was the only way to be free. The moment it happened, the first victim was released and the second took her place. The pattern continued like that, passing from one to another. Lena had come much later, caught in that same cycle. But by the time she understood what had to be done, the incidents had already drawn attention. The university sealed the room off, closing it for years. Later, renovations followed as an attempt to bury what had happened and start over. So Lena waited and waited until the room was opened again and lured in a new occupant, Ileana. Upon hearing the full story, Ileana's panic surged. She ran toward the door, but the air itself seemed to pull her back. Lena advanced silently, grasping her shoulders and dragging her toward the window. Her grip wavered and she could not meet Ileana's eyes. For a second, Lena stopped and her hold loosened just enough to suggest she might let go. She didn't. The window gave way, cold air rushed in, and her hands pressed forward. Ileana stumbled back with her footing slipping at the edge, causing the room to tilt out of place beneath her. The chill of the wind rushed in as Ileana screamed. The ground rushed toward her in a blur, her stomach dropping as panic clawed through her chest. Her final sight was Lena's ghostly figure, dissipating slowly with a soft, sad smile etched on her face. Months later, a new first-year student stepped into the girls' dormitory, with her backpack shifting as she looked around the busy hallway. She paused, glancing at the doors, when a sudden tap on her shoulder made her jump. She turned to see a pale girl, slightly taller than herself, with black straight hair falling freely over her shoulders. There was a soft smile on her face and her voice was gentle, almost inviting as she introduced herself.
Hi, I am Ileana. Would you like to be my roommate?